Basically, we are living in a very turbulent age of eroding democracy. Democracy is eroding both in East and West, but nowhere it is so pronounced as it is eroding in India. Democratic forces are eroding, fascist powers are replacing them. They are transforming democracies into the fascist states. Neo-Nazi slogans are there. We see all the time. Last month, we witnessed the election results of Italy and Sweden, and we see the fascist forces there. But if we see India, we see what is happening under the Modi regime that is led by Hindutva ideology is mob lynchings. We see extrajudicial killings, arbitrary detention of human rights workers, crackdown on journalists, uh, lawyers, whoever is raising voice against the government. Victims are, we see the attacks on mosques and churches, and then the victims being arrested instead of the perpetrators. So I'm not going in detail what is happening in India. We all know that fascist forces are replacing the Indian democracy. Here, the purpose of this seminar is to discuss what is happening, the Hindutva forces, how Hindutva forces are active in the West, in countries like Canada, United States, UK, New Zealand, Australia. I will request Vijay Lakshmi to begin her opening remarks. Thank you, Vijay. Over to you.
Thank you, Tezeen, for inviting me, and I'm happy to be here. And thank you. Happy to see Raju Rajgopal from USA as well. Tezeen, what do I say? We all know what is happening in India. I just feel blessed that we are in this part of the world from where we can raise voices without fear. And I try to use every opportunity that I get to speak against the Hindutva, rising Hindutva. I feel the majority community is not opening up, simply because I think they are under the illusion that probably what is happening in India is right, or maybe they are not aware of it, or the media, of course, is going out of its way to hide what's going on. And so I just wanted to confirm if you all can hear me. Is my volume right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're good to
Thank
go.
you. Yeah. So, I feel sad that the way media is hiding the truths, but there is still enough information for us to all know what exactly is happening in India. And I feel and I believe that the majority community should open up, because this does not represent our religion at all. Hinduism does not, we do not have to kill Muslims to, uphold our religion. So I use this opportunity every time to speak against what's happening. I believe that, the lynchings against Muslims are used as an excuse to actually cover up major issues that's happening in the country. The economy is completely in the doldrums, and the country is being sold. It's being corrupted by the corporates. Job employments have disappeared. There has been no government employment since 2018. 80% of the population is getting free grains when they should be getting employment, not just free grains, and that's also poor quality grains. And this was started during COVID, but after that also those people have not been allowed. They are still not on their feet enough to go back to a normal life. So these are all very tragic incidents, and I believe that the government, because to hide its own incompetence, goes after the minorities, to use it as a cover up for their own incompetencies and their corruption. So, we need to expose that at every front possible. Today also I was with a congressman in our community, and he heard us, and we have asked him to support our resolution, which Ilan Omar has passed against to fight for minority rights in India. I think, the fact that we are here, the fear should be much less, and we should be far more vocal. Thank you, Dazeen.
Thank you very much, Vijay, for your remarks about what is happening. And we expect more, inshallah, in question answer session, especially what is happening here in the West. I mean, exhibiting bulldozer in an independent rally in New Jersey. We have witnessed that. We have witnessed threats, millions of emails to the panelist of Hindutva, dismantling Hindutva conference last year. We saw Leicester violence here and many other incidents, and then backlash to individuals and activists working in the West. to the parliamentarians. Even the parliamentarians are getting are receiving backlash, who are raising voice against the Hindutva genocidal violence in India. So, and then we have witnessed last night. We have witnessed there was some incident in Mississauga in Toronto. I won't. It's very premature to comment on that incident, but some of you might know about that. There was some rift between two groups, and the police was there, and police was trying to control, but not. Now I will invite Raja Rajgopal, co-founder of Hindu for Human Rights. He's joining us from California. Over to you, Raju.
Thank you so much for having me. My colleague Sunita was supposed to address you today, but has instead sent a video message, which I think we'll see later. I'm happy to be invited to take her place in this live panel. I want to share a few remarks, if I may, not on the main topic today, which I will address during the Q&A, but more on the battle of words these days about Hindutva and Hinduism. Turning the clock back 78 years, the founder of the Hindu Mahasabha, which was the precursor to the RSS, and the author of the seminal 1923 essay, Hindutva, V.D. Savarkar, was interviewed in 1944 by war correspondent Tom Trenner. This was 3 years before India's independence. Savarkar was asked, how do you plan to treat the Mohammedans, implying how an independent India would treat its Muslims? Savarkar responded without any hesitation, as a minority in the position of your Negroes. I'm sure Savarkar was well aware of how African Americans were being treated in those days. Trenner persisted, and if the Mohammedans succeed in seceding and set up their own country, Savarkar declared boldly, as in your country, there will be civil war. So in a nutshell, Savarkar had described how his Hindu Rashtra would treat its Muslims, like the Negroes in America, while at the same time threatening deadly consequences if Muslims dared to call for a separate country. As it happened, the Hindu Rashtra that he was dreaming of did not come about, and instead India was declared a democratic, secular state, equidistant from all faiths. Based on this premise and a promise, India remained home to more Muslims than independent Pakistan, excluding the then East Pakistan. However, unfortunately, Savarkar's prophetic words did not just disappear into the dustbins of history. They were quietly nurtured and incubated in RSS shakas for over 70 years and has now come into full view, as we can see, both in India and internationally. What we're witnessing today is indeed an all-out war against India's minorities by an RSS BJP-led government and its supporters around the world. But in his essay, Hindutva, Savarkar said something more. He unhesitatingly equated Hindu nationalism with white nationalism. And that's something we all should take a note, because we in the West need to increasingly compare Hindu nationalism with white nationalism and RSS support for white nationalism from the very beginning. Here's what he said. Take the case of America. When the German war broke out, she suddenly had to face the danger of desertions of her German citizens, while the Negro citizens there sympathized more with their brethren in Africa than with their white countrymen. American state, in the last resort, must stand or fall with the fortunes of its Anglo-Saxon constituents, so with the Hindus. So without any real understanding of US history, Savarkar had planted the seeds of racism, as well as accusations of extraterritorial loyalties of India's Muslims, seeds that the RSS shakas would carefully water and fertilize for the next 7 decades. What we are now seeing in full bloom today is a product of Hindutva ideology, as defined by Savarkar, expanded upon by the RSS over the years. Now, more recently, perhaps embarrassed by the bigoted historical foundation of Hindutva, Hindu nationalists, especially overseas, especially in the United States, are busy today trying to rehabilitate the word Hindutva, with some even claiming that it's the same as Hinduism. That's ingenuous, to say the least, and runs counter to Savarkar's clear thesis that Hindutva is distinct and separate from Hinduism. And this point we must hammer over and over again and not let all these alternate narratives take hold in our communities. We at HFHR believe that Hindutva does not need an academic definition, as it distinguishes itself through the violent words and deeds of its self-identified votaries, as Tazeen pointed out, portraying religious minorities as less than patriotic, rationalizing or ignoring mob violence, attacking scholars, journalists, intellectuals who dare to speak, and imposing one's dietary values upon others, and so on. We completely reject Hindutva for what it stands and what it has wrought, and declare that it has very little to do with our Hinduism. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Raju Rajgopal. And as a Muslim, I can understand, because we have faced the accusations of extremism and violence and terrorism just because of a group, Al Qaeda or ISIS. So we can understand that Hindus are there who are feeling that they should be, their rhetoric, their stance is very different from Hindutva. So this webinar is also an attempt to provide a platform to those Hindus who want to make it clear that they are not the supporters of Hindutva. Hinduism and Hindutva are two separate things. Hindutva is an ideology, a race-based ideology, while Hinduism is a religion, and that has a history of tolerance and pluralism and diversity in India for thousands of years.
I'm Sunita Vishwanath, co-founder of Hindus for Human Rights, and I'm delighted to be part of this event organized by Justice for All Canada, with whom we are honored to partner. Hindus for Human Rights works closely with diverse partners such as Indian American Muslim Council, Dalit Solidarity Forum, India Civil Watch International, and Justice for All USA, and so many others, to advocate for human rights and religious freedom in South Asia, particularly India, and North America, particularly the USA. We are Hindus that lift up the inclusive teachings at the core of our tradition and reject and oppose caste, Hindutva, and all forms of hatred and bigotry. We are one of the only Hindu organizations fighting caste and Hindutva from within the fold. We are keenly aware of the increasing prevalence of Hindutva ideology in the diaspora. If it wasn't explicit before, the bulldozer that was featured in the India Day Parade in Edison, New Jersey, the Hindu-Muslim violence that took place recently in Leicester, UK, should make it clear as day. Hindutva is growing bolder and stronger in the diaspora. What's more, Hindutva is doing harm not only to democracy in India, but also to democracy in the United States and other countries. Consider the Indian flag that was raised in the midst of the January 6th attack on the US Capitol, and the fact that white supremacist Steve Bannon was the chair of the same Hindu Republican Council that helped Trump get elected and is promoting him again. Hindutva ideology is Islamophobic in its DNA, and its adherents seek to transform India from a secular democracy into a Hindu Rashtra. While there are many Hindus who are not supportive of Hindutva, not enough of them are speaking up. And Hindus for Human Rights is working hard to mobilize and organize a platform, a movement, a force of radically inclusive anti-caste, anti-Hindutva Hindus. My sister and comrade, Leena Marimekale, is speaking on this same panel, and you will hear her horrific experience in Toronto, Canada. Her experience shows that Hindutva is alive in Canada too, and we will have to band together in our inclusive and progressive coalitions to resist it. I'm traveling to Toronto for Leena's film screening on November 3rd. I hope the webinar organizers can share the event information, and I hope many of you can join. If you are someone interested in helping us launch a chapter of Hindus for Human Rights in Canada, please write to me immediately at sunita@hindusforhumanrights.org. This is the week of Deepavali or Diwali, and for me and my colleagues in Hindus for Human Rights, the victory of light over darkness and good over evil are religious commitments. We name the evils: caste, Hindutva, war, violence, homophobia, racism, sexism, material greed, poverty, environmental destruction. and we aspire to be the light that vanquishes these evils. In solidarity, and wishing you all a peaceful and joyous Deepavali, Bandichur Divas, Kali Puja, Tihar, and other festivals being celebrated right now by South Asians of different regions and faiths. Thank you so much.
Amrit Wilson, basically from UK. She's the co-founder. She's a writer. She's a researcher. She's an author of more than one book, and a very important anti-racist activist, Marxist, feminist. But she wants her introduction as a co-founder of South Asian Solidarity.
I've been asked today to speak about Leicester and the events there. Now, before I go into that, I want to give a little bit of background about Britain for those people who may not know. I've lived here from the 60s, and I belong to South Asia Solidarity Group, which was set up in the 80s. Now, throughout the late 70s, 80s, we were involved as part of a broader politically black movement. So we kept our identities as Asians, but we still belong to this wide movement of unity between Asians, Africans, and African Caribbeans. And one of the things we did was to fight racism. We fought racism on the streets. We fought attacks on people's homes. And I myself belong to two organizations, the Organization of Women of African and Asian Descent, as well as ours, which was the Nation Women's Group. Now, what's interesting is when we fought racism, we were fighting both random racists as well as the National Front and fascist organizations. Now, what we've seen in Leicester is a conflict between Hindus and Muslims, where the Hindus have been supported by the ultra-right, the new fascist groups, like the English Defence League, for example. Now, how did we reach this position? So how did this happen in Leicester? The HSS, the overseas wing of the RSS, has set up an office in Leicester in 1979. And since then, it's been active through the 80s and 90s. They were raising funds. And those funds, some of them went directly to the RSS. For example, they raised funds for the Gujarat genocide, for the Gujarat earthquake in 2001. And it's been shown, progressive South Asian organizations exposed that this money went to the killers in the Gujarat genocide. The other thing they did was to create vote banks to vote in Narendra Modi supporting MPs of both parties, both the Labour and the Conservative Party. And these MPs went all out for Narendra Modi. What we see now is a new strategy in Leicester. And this is a strategy to create conflict on the streets. And its aim is to strengthen the narrative of Hinduphobia in India. And in Britain, to stop any criticism of Narendra Modi, and which will be then dubbed as Hinduphobic. And they have learned this from the Israel lobby. We have evidence that the Zionists advise them how to create Hinduphobia as a thing in this country, to be accepted on a par with Islamophobia. We also have evidence that what happened in Leicester, although it was perpetrated by some of the poorest working class communities who are, among, Muslims as well as Hindus are poor in this country. But some of the poorest countries were basically used by the HSS. And the people pulling the strings were people like Satish Sharma, who is the director of the National Council of Hindu Temples, who is extremely Islamophobic and casteist and an RSS man. Unfortunately, some 200 temples come under the purview of the NCHT. So this is the situation. They try to do the same thing in Brent, and I think they're likely to try this in other places. We are on the ground. We are fighting this. We're trying to educate the communities to look behind to look at the people who are pulling the strings from behind. So the struggle is on, and that's all I'd like to say. So thank you very much for inviting me.
Blake is the first member of parliament, perhaps in the whole world, that has submitted, that had presented petitions. Actually, he presented Justice for All petition in the parliament this Friday. So we have a short clip of his presentation. So we would like to show our audience the first parliamentary petition against the Hindutva, against the genocidal remarks against Muslims.
Presenting petitions, the Honourable Member for Edmonton Greensback.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I have two petitions to present on behalf of Canadians. One petition is in regards to ensuring that we acknowledge that the Indian government's discriminatory anti-minority laws, the rising threat of genocide against Muslims, and the prosecution of Christians, Dalits, and other minorities in India. Additionally, they want to include human rights experts in all trade and bilateral agreements with India to safeguard the freedom, justice, and human rights of prosecuted minorities there.
We are thankful to Blake Desjardins and NDP that they are working, closely working with Justice for All Canada against the aggression of Hindutva forces in India. Raju Rajgopal, I would like you to comment on Amrit Wilson's remarks about Hinduphobia. What is Hinduphobia, and how do you see it in connection with the Hindutva violence, that Hindutva threats and violence that are being received by many of us in the West?
Yeah,
over to you.
Yeah, I think Amrit is absolutely right. It's a very clearly thought out strategy on how to cover for the rising Islamophobia and violence against Muslims in India. And that strategy is to portray Hindus as the real victims. And they've been searching very hard to find evidence of real Hinduphobia. Unfortunately, until recently, they had very few things to stand on, at least in the US. So they had to go on things like somebody mocked somebody after a lecture on Hinduism saying, "What caste are you?" That's considered Hinduphobia. Or criticizing the caste system, or asking even questions about the caste system, Hinduphobia. So they had drilling into the college students the idea that Hinduphobia is real and they're having a hard time. And we are, as Hindus for Human Rights, we are out there in the front lines battling that while we agree there are incidents of violence against Hindus, there is nothing comparable to worldwide Islamophobia, and they're doing a great injustice by trying to push this Hinduphobia narrative, which I think is bound to fail in the long run, and that's what we are working on. So yes, clearly you can see fingerprints of Zionism in whatever they're doing, and they started it in during the Vision 2000 gala in Washington, D.C., which is when some of the initial interactions happened between the Zionist lobby and the VHP lobby, and they've been going at it ever since. So we must, we should not be afraid of saying, yes, there is violence against Hindus, but more often than not, it is part of the racism, not because you're Hindu. And I think Amrit also touched upon it. In UK, they've gone through a history of racism against South Asians, not because of their religion, but because of the color of their skin. And we need to clearly distinguish that and dissect the evidence and demand evidence to support the idea that there is Hinduphobia. And that's what we are doing. Thank you.
Let me make it clear, we respect each and every faith, be it Islam or Hinduism or Christianity or any other faith. Basically, as criticizing Saudi Arabia is not Islamophobia. Criticizing the policies of Saudi government against the aggression in Yemen or anywhere else is not Islamophobia. Criticizing Modi government is not Hinduphobia. Criticizing the policies of Israel is not anti-Semitism. That's just, I would like to say. I would like to ask you a question regarding Hindutva threats in United States. Will you please explain what is happening in United States, especially as you mentioned the bulldozer in the in the rally.
Yeah, thank you, Tehseen. Before I answer that, I would also like to compare Hinduphobia to, like, when Black Lives Matter was gaining grounds in the US, the white folks immediately jumped in to say, oh, all lives matter. No, all lives do matter, but Black lives just matter because Blacks are the ones who are being targeted, not the white community. Anyway, so Hinduphobia is similar to that. I was on a panel with some Indian students who, whose parents are supporting the BJP in India and who are part of the HSS. So, those kids, they are from the same college that my daughter went to, the same university. And they claim that they are being, they are targets of Hinduphobia. So I asked them what exactly happened in college. And they said, no, that we are not allowed to even wear our clothes or our bindis and all. I said, my daughter went to the same university. She had never had any problems. In fact, she and her white friends loved dressing up in Indian clothes. So there was absolutely no sense of Hinduphobia. I said, you guys should read a lot more than what is being told to you and find out the difference between Islamophobia and Hinduphobia. And so you know exactly what's going on, and rather than just repeat what's being told to you. Coming back to Hindutva attacks, I was a target of an attack when I had just posted on Facebook. It was not even in any article as such, on Amit Shah, the Home Minister, who along with Narendra Modi are key villains in the Gujarat riots. But unfortunately, they have escaped a prosecution of any sort because of the way they've manipulated the justice system. But anyway, I just had one post saying that he should, he's suffering from cancer, likely cancer, and he was in hospital for those 3 days. And I was like, I have no regrets for that life lost for the sake of humanity. It was a casual remark which I made, and I just went off to sleep. The next morning, there was a beehive of attacks on me from the BJP IT cell. BJP IT cell, for those who do not know, they are employed just to target, people who are opposing the Hindutva ideology and the BJP. And there are like 65,000 of them employed on just daily wages, very low wages, no benefits, nothing. But the unemployment in India is so high, I guess, Indian youth are left with no option but to take up those options. And so they are there just to target female journalists, anybody who opposes, not just females, even men, and students, civil rights activists, all those people are targets, journalists are targets. And so next morning, there was a picture of me, a picture which they had taken from Facebook, again posted by all the union ministers, India's top BJP leaders. Everybody had this post. How dare, she's wishing death on Amit Shah. I said, first of all, I never wished any death. I just said that's a possibility. I never wished it. But even if I wished, as a public servant, you should have the you should be wondering why people are wishing me death rather than threatening me. I was threatened with jail. I was threatened with all kinds of consequences. People even found my daughter's email address and wrote nasty mails to her that we'll rape your mother and blah, blah, blah. So I'm not the only one, though. I would say all female journalists in India are at an attack. I would also like to state the case of one professor here, Audrey Tushke, who faces, who faces these vile messages every single day. But now it's reached a point where that particular attack stunned me, that ministers would have no task but to go hunting for me, like threatening to get me arrested and all that. It was amazing. Finally, the matter reached at such a point that Amit Shah had to come out and give a statement that all is well, and people who are wishing him, when people wish him death, he only gets stronger, or some such stupid comment that was. And I was like, please look into yourself and see, if people are wishing you death, you must be doing something wrong and you need to ruminate on that. But coming back to the professor, yeah, I feel sorry for her that, she's a scholar. She's just doing her work. She's doing her research work, and she's being unnecessarily attacked for that. But by now, I think all of us have developed pretty thick skin. I feel we are living in a safe country, and we should use this opportunity to get back, attack, give them back in their own, in every way possible. So I'm doing that, and I am seeing everybody else do that too. So no harm caused.
The audience, someone asked the question about the relationship. I mean, as Amrit Wilson, basically, I believe that this question is regarding Amrit, but Amrit is not here. So anyone would like to answer this question? That Amrit mentioned that Hinduphobia, the concept of Hinduphobia has been taken from Zionism. That if somebody is criticizing Israel, he is being called anti-Semitic. So anyone would like to, Vijay or Raju, anyone would like to comment on this question? Would like to answer this question, that is it anti-Semitic to criticize Israel, or anti-Hinduphobic to criticize Modi government in India?
I mean, this is a very unfortunate question that I it really deserves an answer, but I will try. Basically, what this means is India is equal to Hindu, Hindu equal to Modi, Modi equal to India. Therefore, any attack on any of those things is an attack on India. And as an Indian, as a Indian American, as somebody who loves both India and the US, and I've spent a lot of my time working with the poor people in India, nearly 30 years, for me to be labeled as anti-India or anti-Hindu is so trashy that I don't think it deserves any response directly. But it is unfortunate that many people, including people in my own family, seem to believe in that formula because that's been drilled in by the 65,000 army that Vijay Lakshmi mentioned. Continue to make this point. Goebbels said, repetition is the art of propaganda, right? Something like that. And you drill that over and over and over again. And that's what people start to believe, that Modi is India and India is Hindu, and therefore we will not tolerate any criticism of anyone. And that's where I would like to leave it. The initial impetus on the strategy may have come from the Hindu nationalist dialogue with the Zionists, but I have to say that they've far exceeded what the Zionists could have done in the damage they're doing to democracies, not just in India, to the rest of the world. I can't imagine Israel damaging other democracies in the way that Hindutva is doing right now. So they're on their own now. They don't need Zionism to teach them what to do.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. They are not only damaging democracy in India, but democracies around the world. I mean, we see the rising political influence of Hindutva followers all over the West. We can see that. Raju, I would like you to comment on the rising influence of Hindutva followers in the Western politics. Recently, we saw some very pronounced changes in the Western politics: anti-immigrant, racist, neo-fascist.
Do you want me to respond to that?
Yeah, please, if you can, and we will turn over.
It is. We have been working or trying to work closely. Our initial impression 2-3 years ago, wow, we have now 4 Indian American congressmen. They all have liberal credentials, and therefore they are going to support what we are doing. That was our initial thought. And I think we were kind of naive to think that way, because one of them turned out to be entirely in the arms of Hindutva and the RSS, which much of his donations coming from the RSS. And there's no way he can change that. And the other one was attacked for some initial efforts to criticize Modi government for the Kashmir policy, and then immediately there is a kind of a retrenchment or a whatever whatever they say now is so circumspect. They will not come out and openly criticize Modi or Hindutva, even though face to face when we meet them, they will say, we are as concerned as you. We support what you're doing. But dear congressman, why don't you do something? Well, that'll be the end of my career. How much money do you guys have? How many thousands of supporters do you guys have? When you have that, we can talk. That's I'm kind of paraphrasing the tone of the message. So we now have to rely on other Congress people and senators who have been very loving of India, Indian democracy, and are very concerned about it, and try to influence them to speak up. Because I don't think our 4 Congress people anytime soon will come out in direct opposition to Modi. So, and money power is what this is all about. And the other way we can influence these Congress people is to continue to work at the local level. As we used to do, there were some city resolutions against against the CAA. A lot of work went on in Chicago, and it was about to also pass the Chicago, the city council, but last minute intervention, and I presume last minute intervention also includes the dollar, that a lot of number of elder people changed their mind, almost with also with direct intervention of Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy. So that failed. So that kind of put a stop to, in a way, to our local advocacy, and we need to pick it up because for example, in Oakland, we have a progressive lady, Janani Balasubramaniam, who is running for the Oakland City Council. We need to approach people like that to start locally before we act nationally. That's the only way we're going to have any results at the end of the day. So I don't think we can ever match the money power of the Hindu nationalists. But I think we have the moral power and the right, and if we can use it to mobilize more people, not just Indian Americans, but I think we have to partner with Black Lives Matter. We have to partner with Native Americans and other groups to broaden our alliance, because I think they can all understand human rights issues as much as we do. So that's kind of where I think we should be heading next year.
Thank you very much, Rajgopal. You are right. We need to come closer to all the organizations who are against racism, against who are working for Black Lives Matter, who are working against Islamophobia, even who are working against the Hindu extremism. Given your experiences with your tweet, what would you suggest in terms of security protocol for various diaspora organizations and individuals? What is your takeaway, basically?
Okay, you know what? Since the threats are being made from India, not from the US, there's pretty much nothing that we can do except raise awareness about that, which is what Tushke does, and I do it too. But most of the time, I just dismiss it because I know they are just idle threats. Though there are threats of FIRs being filed and rape threats and stuff like that, but I know I'm safe in this country. What can we do? Even if we go to the police, what are we going to say, that the threats are coming from India? Well, that definitely is a huge problem. Of course, there was a time when, I had written an article on Kashmir Files. When Kashmir Files was being screened for the first time in the USA, I was one of the first people to write about it because the screening first happened in USA and not in India. And so as soon as I wrote that, there were threats to my editor that, where is she? We need her address. If she had been if I had been in New Jersey, they would have had me arrested for something. But since I'm not in New Jersey, they can't do anything about me, but they wanted to know where I was, my whereabouts and all that. And there was also calls from the External Affairs Ministry in India to my editor because, there were bureaucrats who had been posted in the US who had gone back to India. And so they knew my editor and they called my editor that please refrain from writing such articles, which was absolutely ridiculous. So these are kind of threats which I really laugh it off because I really am blessed. I think it's a blessing to be in this country at this point. If I had been in India, probably I would have been facing arrest. But I think we should use that opportunity. At every point I say this, but really, I think we should use that the positivity of this country, the liberalism that still exists in this country.
I think the real threats in the US is the threat of legal action Hindu nationalist groups seem to be very fond of using their money power to go after anybody whom they don't like. And regardless of whether they have a good case or not, when you have the money, you can try to shut up people through legal action. And I'm myself a target of one such legal action that's in the courts right now. I think we have, both Sunita and myself, have not stopped our advocacy in any way because of the legal threat, but I'm sure that is something that does cross people's minds, especially minority organization. That threat is real, and we have to find ways of navigating around such threats and still be able to make our case with facts and figures rather than speculation and things like that. So,
what is the solution to curb the spread of Hindutva ideology in India and also in other countries worldwide? So, what is the solution? What strategies we can use to combat some of them? You explained. I mean, Audrey Trishke is receiving threats. There is Leicester violence, and then Hindutva has a history to perpetrate. We know that, as you mentioned, that it is active before partition of India. It was active, and they were perpetrating violence. They were perpetrating this rhetoric of hatred and dividing communities. And now they are exporting this politics of division here in the West, as we see in Leicester violence. And Amrit commented on that they are trying to provoke Muslims. Last night we see that there was some mob. There were actually two groups, and one was quite visible. They were trying to provoke the other mob here in Mississauga in Toronto. I don't want to come in because it is very premature to do that. So what would be the strategies, more strategies we can discuss? How we can. I discussed it with Peter Frederick too, and invited him, but he was busy somewhere else and he couldn't join us here in the webinar. So what could be the strategies that we can tackle this Hindutva threats and violence in the West? Especially, I'm concerned about the West.
Okay, Tehzeen, the first thing is, since you mentioned Peter, I would like to say that Peter and me go through various city councils and educate the people. There are a lot of people here, council board members and all, who give permissions to the Hindutva events without even realizing that they are organized by these organizations. They just think it's a nice, Hindu festival like a Diwali or even a Raksha Bandhan and all that, and they give permissions. And then when we speak and inform them that, this looks harmless, but it's not just a harmless festivity. This is to just garner support for their organizations, but then they use the organizations for a very different purpose altogether. And so when they hear that, they are surprised, that there is a difference between Hindutva and Hindus. And as for the solutions, I believe that in India, though these organizations have been here for 30, 40 years in the US, even 50 years in the US, they were actually quite quiet. They were restricted in their own community, just little festivities here and there to the temple events and all that. I think they really became aggressive only after 2002, when there was international backlash against Narendra Modi, and they rose up in defense of Narendra Modi. I think 2002 was when they really came out. And then when just before he became the prime minister, that's when they got even more active, when Narendra Modi was banned from coming to the USA for 10 years. But he needed to, Narendra Modi has this fascination for the West. I don't know why. I think even the backlash from the West would hurt him much more than, in any opposition from the country. And so Modi tried to reach out to his supporters here and, to help him, prop him up as some world leader kind of a thing, and which has been going on, which is still going on. So until he is removed from power, I do not see any solution for that Hindutva in India. As for the West, I think, educating people through city council, through any available platform, Raju is also through his organization doing a lot too. So the only thing we can do is to educate, because we are very far behind. They are already a very established cadre. They have 30-40,000 members in the US. There are 3.5 million Hindus in the US, but these people, the Hindutva guys, are also number about 30 to 40,000. So they are a strong cadre. So they can whip up any event if they want. They have the money, like Raju said. They use all these functions to fundraise, and most people who are supporting this don't even realize where their money is going. They think supporting the Hindu religion is the same as supporting your country, which is, and it's the same as supporting your leader. So, that kind of a propaganda, I don't know how they made it so successful. That really is a study for another day. But I really think there's no other solution besides. I think the moment Narendra Modi government goes, these organizations will again go back to what it was, to actual, just in their quiet corners. And so, yeah, it's very important to electorally fight Modi in India.
As Arundhati Roy says, that we will have to wait for 2 decades, at least 2 decades.
No, I am a lot more optimistic than that. I think 2024 will be a Waterloo for Narendra Modi. I don't think he's going to survive 2024.
I mean, I agree for the most part what Vijay Lakshmi said, except for the 2024 part. But I used to think that what happens in the diaspora is merely a symptom of what's happening in India. And I think we were in many ways vastly underestimating the influence of the diaspora on what's happening in India. So if think about people, 1,000 people, I'm sure many of them were US citizens too, traveling to India to actively campaign for Narendra Modi. So the diaspora's influence on India, it kind of made me rethink whether we were just a symptom of what's happening in India, or we are actually creating facts on the ground in India. And I agree with Vijay Lakshmi that the influence of the West are extremely important on Narendra Modi's psyche. And I think it's important that we continue to, with whatever happens in India in 2024, I think we need to continue to focus on the diaspora and continue our education. Now, for my part, since I speak as a Hindu, our biggest request is people that have never really spoken out as Hindus in the past, but were born in Hindu families. It's extremely important to join ranks with us, because an alternative voice of Hindus to other Hindu nationalist organizations is extremely important. And they are indeed scared of, because for so long they survived without any alternate voice of Hindus in the corridors of power. And suddenly they see an upstart like Hindutva for Human Rights coming up, and they can call us a fringe movement, they can call us a very small inconsequential group, but the fact that they sued me and Sunita shows that they do attach significance to the fact that we speak as Hindus. And any of you listening, regardless of which organization you belong to, joining up with Hindus for Human Rights and amplifying the Hindu voice that we provide can be one of the major avenues to counter Hindu nationalists who claim, of course, that they speak for all the Hindus in the world.
Now I would invite Taha Ghayur, the Executive Director of Justice for All Canada. Taha is a writer, a community activator, a human rights advocate, mashallah, very active in this human rights advocacy work and all our campaigns. So Taha will conclude the discussion, inshallah. Taha, over to you.
Thank you, Tazeen, for being MC tonight, and really appreciate Raju and Vijay Lakshmi for your very candid and nuanced conversation, along with, of course, all the wonderful panelists who sent in their recorded messages. We truly appreciate your courage and resilience standing up against people within your own faith who are essentially using your faith to propagate all forms of extremism and fascism. Is not easy. Muslims have been called upon to do that almost 20 years ago in the aftermath of 9/11. And since then, Muslims in America and Canada have been, of course, distancing themselves categorically from ISIS and Osama bin Laden or Al Qaeda, and we expect the same from our Hindu friends, and we truly appreciate your allyship in this work of protecting minorities around the world, and in this case specifically Muslim, Dalit, Sikh, Christian minorities who are under attack, as we are aware, under the BJP government. So thank you so much for once again for your resilience and courage in doing what you're doing, and we are with you, and we look forward to working with you in the near future. That being said, as if you're joining us from the United States, we encourage you to visit our website, justiceforall.org, to learn more about what Save India from Fascism campaign is doing in terms of working on Congress resolutions, to raising awareness on the ground, and working with some of the wonderful panelists, of course, here as well. And in Canada, which is where we are located, we encourage you to visit saveindia.ca, which is where you're going to find a list of actions you can take right here, encouraging and imploring Canadian government to actually take action. And some of our demands include that as Canada renews its trade relations with India, whether it's EFTA or FIPA or any other trade agreements, we want to ensure that it is all these trade relations are premised on human rights, and there are clear human rights chapters included in these upcoming trade agreement renewals. We want to make sure that Canada essentially does a diplomatic boycott of the G20 summit if the BJP government decides to hold any meetings in the Kashmir. And we, of course, have a list of other actions that we have been calling for in terms of protecting minority rights, the rights of women to, of course, wear hijab anywhere, especially in education institutions in India, and a list of other things that you can check out on our website. So once again, thank you so much, everyone, for joining tonight for this very critical, timely conversation, and we look forward to listening. We look forward to actually hearing from our panelists in the future once again. And those of you who are wondering what you can do, well, we always ask you to do three things for this cause. Number one, educate yourself. This is what you're doing tonight. Number two, advocate, amplify the voices of wonderful panelists who are here today. Amplify the voices of human rights defenders, both in India as well as in other parts of the world and in the diaspora in Canada. And number three is to donate to Justice for All Canada or Justice for All US, once again, so that we can continue working on these causes. So once again, thank you everybody for joining. Truly appreciate your time. Good night, and hope we are inspired to actually do more to fight all forms of racism, fascism, and genocides.